And then, in a twist you won't expect, sci-fi author John Flagg shares his supernatural story of going from atheist to Christian, and how ancient science, biblical truth, and alien signals collide in a powerful exploration of God's fingerprints in the cosmos.
Vulnerability, vision, and a whole new way to see your world. This is Unscripted Faith, where nothing's off limits. Let's go.
Here we go! Welcome back to Unscripted Faith. Our next guest went from lifelong atheist to believer after a supernatural encounter with God. And what happened next might blow your mind. John Flagg is the author behind the Lucifer Project, a faith-based sci-fi series that weaves together aliens, ancient floods, and biblical truth. John, it is great to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. Really, really looking forward to this.
Oh, it's so amazing to sit down. Okay, so we've got to go into your story here.
Sure.
You were an atheist, and then God met you in a supernatural way. Tell us your story.
Absolutely. So yeah, I really did live my life as an atheist. I think one of the things I really struggled with was the whole Earth is 6,000 years old thing. I had a Christian neighbor who believed that, and I just, as an engineer, my background is engineering, I just couldn't understand that, and so I just didn't believe Christianity. I didn't believe in the Bible, and I just said, I'm going to live my life as an atheist, and I did, and I didn't live it very well, honestly. I made a lot of mistakes, and I was 38. It was March of 2008, and in the middle of the night, I had a vision. I had a supernatural vision from God, and I know people that live atheists like me would say, oh, it was just a dream, but it wasn't. It was a vision. You know the difference. And,
yes.
God had showed me some stuff. He started talking to me, and I went from that night, I went from somebody who didn't believe at all to 100% believing that God was real. I didn't know anything. I didn't know the Bible. I didn't know anything. And so he's put me on a journey to where I am today.
Did anything lead to that? I mean, was it just out of the blue? Was there grandmama praying for you, mom and dad praying for you? I mean, just Jesus showed up. I mean, we're hearing a lot more of that, but I'm just curious on what the backdrop behind that is. Was there anything that kind of led up to it?
Yeah, so certainly from my life perspective, I was in a very low point in my life. I'd made really terrible decisions like so many of us do.
Yes.
So I was at a really low place. What was most interesting is when, I had that experience, I didn't know anything, and I had to go to some people, try to figure out what it was. And one of the people I went to, I didn't really know any Christians, and I knew this one particular woman by the name of Tricia, and she later became my wife. That was absolutely amazing. And so God just lines everything up, and I know she was praying for me, but she didn't know it at the time either.
Yeah.
So that's how that all kind of came to be. Yeah, it's amazing.
Cool.
Amazing. So when you have this vision from God, you instantly know that it's Him, and you knew that did you go to a church, or what happened next?
Well, what happened next was, meeting with Tricia, and just what is this? And she explained the whole gospel message to me, and the very next day I became a Christian. I was saved, and it wasn't more than 2 weeks later that I had another vision. I mean, God really was trying to get me, because I was so hard-hearted, and that's when the vision of writing these books came in, and that's a whole nother story.
Share that. Tell us about that.
Right. So I had this second vision, and this one, God said to me, you're going to write a book like the Da Vinci Code that changes the world. And he's like, okay, who am I? Who am I to write a book that's going to change your world? But I knew immediately what God meant. The Da Vinci Code was famous, and it took people that were very light in their faith, and it gave them an opportunity to see Jesus as just a man. Take the divinity out of him, and so many people famously walked away from their faith during that time frame of the Da Vinci Code. And I knew immediately inside my heart that, no, I'm going to do the exact opposite with my book series. We're going to bring people that are maybe Christian curious, maybe not even saved, or those who are light in their faith, and let them see, God through a new light. And but can you imagine, who am I to write this book? Come on, God, So we began this journey of a challenge of becoming an author, because at the time I never.
Do you have a background with any of that, or so you decided? All right, God just called you, said, "All right, I want you to put pen to paper and just start beginning to write."
Exactly. Me, an author. I'm a business owner.
That's awesome.
My degree's in engineering. My worst grades in school was creative writing. And I'm like, God, pick somebody else, And that's when it really began, the challenge that I had, which was learning to call myself an author. I really did have an identity crisis, right? So I'm going from putting pen to paper and trying to write a book I didn't even know what I was going to write about, But God just kept putting one person in front of me after another after another.
That's how He does it.
And it's amazing, right? And so one step after another, the content of these books became clear. And, we're going to talk about aliens and whatnot, but I felt a call, like this man who eventually became my spiritual father. I had felt inside I needed to ask him a question, so I asked him, was like, would you mind meeting with me? And he was very generous and said, yeah, I'll talk to you. And I said, hey, I have a tough question for you. What if in real life we were to discover aliens? Someday we have actual proof of aliens. What would they be? Because I was new to my faith, but I'm like, as far as I can read this Bible thing, I don't know that the Bible really allows that much room for alien life without really getting into some weird theology stuff. And I'm like, what would it be? Well, he answered that question, and that answer was what kind of got this whole book birthed. Yeah.
Come on. So, okay, you attack biblical truth, aliens, floods. Tell us more about how this kind of came together, this picture, because I'm sure that in your journey of writing this, it was a lot of learning as well for you. So paint that picture for us and how this Lucifer Project kind of encompasses all of that.
Yeah, so it really is step by step of God's faith, and He just always puts the right people in place at the right time.
Sure.
And, I did go through early on, I went through a little bit of an identity crisis, because as you're writing, you get that first sort of manuscript done, and it's horrible, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so bad at this, Lord, find somebody else. Why would you choose me, the guy who's horrible at creative writing? Come on. And so you go through this, and I remember this really wise woman that I had listened to a message from, and it was talking about, I think her name might have been Pastor Angela Madden, I'm not entirely sure, but it was about your identity in Christ. And I started realizing, you know what, okay, if God calls me an author, then I'm an author, and so let's start acting like it. And let's stop being so negative, and let's just focus on areas of growth and opportunities. And it's not going to be easy, but we're going to get there, and God's going to make sure I'm going to get there. And so we really just started pouring into calling myself an author, and one person after another showed up that I needed at the right time, with the right storylines, with these crazy different things. And then I think my favorite experience was actually at a local coffee shop here in this area. And I was just researching, going back to that 6,000-year-old thing, right? I've never believed that, even as a Christian now. I still don't believe that. So I'm in this really tough position. Like, I want to write about this future world. I want to do all these things, but how do I convince the Christian world that the world is not 6,000 years old, or at least an opportunity exists that maybe the Bible doesn't say the earth is 6,000 years old? So I was researching these things in a local coffee shop, and I was like, Lord, how do I do this? And it's another one of those supernatural experiences. I know they don't happen very often. Very blessed early on my walk, and it was right over my shoulder. I heard these words. I'm like, Lord, how do I do this? And these words came out and said, research ancient weather events. And I'm like, who does that? I don't know anything about ancient weather events. So what do? You just go into Google, like, ancient weather events. I don't know what I'm doing. And one thing after another. And very quickly, this thing called a 5.9 kiloyear event popped up. And that is very interesting to me, because a 5.9 kiloyear event is 5,900 years ago, plus or minus 200 years if you actually look at the Wikipedia page or whatever on it. And I was like, wow, this is the exact same time frame as, quote unquote, the earth is old, right? Yes. So I was like, this is very interesting. So I started diving into that, and discovered there was this worldwide flood that hit 6,000 years ago. And I'm like, wow, that's really interesting, Lord, because that lines up, so well with my belief system that the earth is not 6,000 years old, and that it actually was redone with Adam and Eve, but there was a world before. So we get into all this stuff, and I don't want to,
yes,
bore the audience with too much of it, but I will say this. It was very interesting to me. I said, Lord, well, that's cool. If there was a flood 6,000 years ago that took out the world that was then, as 2 Peter talks about, and it would redone with Adam and Eve, again, people can have their own viewpoint on that. I was like, well, there better be something for Noah's flood. Exactly the same information, right? And so I looked at, well, how long was it from Adam and Eve to Noah? And it was 1,700 years. So I'm like, okay, well, Lord, if there was a 5.9 kiloyear event in the science world, then there has to be, if you do the math, it would be a 4.2 kiloyear event. And wouldn't you know, I typed in list of kiloyear events, and there it was, boom, a 4.2 kiloyear event. There were 2 floods that wiped out the Middle East. One was 6,000 years ago. One was 4,200 years ago. They line up exactly with Noah's flood and with the flood that would have wiped out, if you believe in that theology, that wiped out the world that was before Adam and Eve. So it's just absolutely fascinating.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Now, listen, we've got about a minute and a half left. I see two parts here, two books.
Yeah.
What is the kind of the plot or the theme that's kind of the thread that runs through this series?
Absolutely. So this is a wild ride, as you can tell just by some of what we're talking about here. It's a wild ride, and we kind of span the globe, and we even go up into the stars. And we're going a couple of decades forward, and we look at mankind discovering an abandoned spacecraft. And we've kind of answered this question, do aliens exist? But then military forces begin to detect an incoming signal. We don't know what it is, but we know it's coming our way. And so we realize, what does the world do when you realize that true aliens are coming? What is the theological perspective? What is the science? What is the military perspective? And then it gets really crazy, and this web of lies and deceits begin to unravel when they realize that there's a Vatican observatory helping guide the signal in. So that's kind of the plot line behind these books, yeah.
Listen, aliens, they coming? Are they coming? Well, I mean, we're gonna find out.
We're going to find out. Where do we get the book at?
Absolutely. So hard copy, it's on Amazon. Ebook, you can pretty much get it anywhere you like to get your ebooks. Nice. And we even have an AI narrated audiobook on audiobooks.com and the Google Play Store.
Yes.
But definitely, everywhere you can get all the information at theluciferproject.com.
Thank you so much, John. Listen, my father-in-law is a huge fan of this book, so he'll be getting part 2 next.
For sure.
Thank you for being with us today. What a blessing.
Yeah,
thank you for your story, and thank you for what you're doing to change believers' lives through this series. Thank you, John.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. When we come back, we'll unpack some of the biggest revelations from today's guests. You don't want to miss it, so stay with us.
This week on Sister to Sister, my husband wrote in, my wife is so opinionated, I don't want to hear any of her opinions. Don't tell me what to do. I can't handle it.
And we're going to talk about marriage. Why does the church emphasize it when Paul focused so much on singleness?
Loving me.
Many of you would agree that CTVN's prayer partners are central to our mission. I'm Crystal Tillman, Vice President of Cornerstone Television. Gloria, a former prayer partner, wrote, "Thank you for being a blessing for so many years. I have been watching Cornerstone TV since it came on the air in April 1979. Continue doing the great work. God has great things in store." Gloria, thank you for your investment. God has been faithful to our prayers.
Well, if you just tuned in with us, you better go back and rewind because we had some neat conversations that we just had. And, I was thinking being authentic, and that's even down to whatever God calls you to do.
Yes.
John was authentic to who he was.
Yes.
And when you really are authentic of who you are, you can do anything that God calls you to do. I mean, he's writing a sci-fi book. I mean, even the creativity behind it, I'm like, man, that makes my brain hurt having to try to come up with 2 thick books like that to do that. But, when you're authentically who you are, then things just naturally just come to the surface and you can just do what it is that God's called you to do.
I like that you said that because even he talked about how he was an engineer. Like his mindset is an engineer, which is very mathematical. Mm-hmm. And so to get into this creative writing, it's a stretch by the world standards, but not with God. We are who God says we are. And so God had this in his heart to do. He placed it there. He gave him the gifting to do it, gave him the know-how, put the steps in front of him. And it led to a beautiful expression that we can all glean from.
Without a doubt, you go back to what Tom, I believe being authentic too is very important.
Yes.
Because when you open up and don't try to cover up, people don't realize who you really are is actually that gifting, that ability, that will all come out as well when you allow God to sweep away all the stuff you're scared to open up about.
Yes.
Is right behind that is all the stuff that God's called you to do.
Yeah, the things you're scared to step into, or like you said, you're scared to face. God sees and knows it all. It is truly his desire for you to awaken into the full measure of who he has designed you to be. And how do you do that? By knowing who he is. When you get acquainted with his character, you will watch it unfold within you, and you'll be able to praise him for it all.
Cornerstone Television wishes to thank all our faithful viewers whose consistent prayers and financial support have made this program possible.